Welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. Today's guest is Master Chek practitioner and triathlete Andrew Johnston. Author of Holistic Strength Training for Triathlon, Andrew is a former professional cyclist and triathlete. He is the first leukemia survivor to qualify for and finish the Hawaii Ironman World Championships, the first leukemia survivor to win an iron distance triathlon, and twice voted one of the top trainers in America by Men's Health magazine. Andrew is a Master Chek practitioner with a busy practice in Atlanta.
Hello and welcome to Living 4D with Paul Chek. I am super excited to share an amazing guest today, Andrew Johnston. Andrew's been a longtime friend of mine. He was a student of the Chek Institute for many years. He's a level 4 Chek practitioner and just an all-around amazing human being. Andrew has a lot of amazing athletic accomplishments, and he's conquered health challenges of significance, which he will share. And he has written some excellent books, one titled Spot On Nutrition, A Holistic Strategy for Optimal Health and Performance, Volume 1, and Holistic Strength Training for Triathlon. He's also got a DVD documentary of his often very challenging and scary life as an elite athlete titled Living is Winning. Andrew, it's such a blessing to have you on Living 4D with me. I'm excited to dive into your story and share what we're all capable of overcoming through love, commitment, and the support of family and those that love us.
Most definitely. I'm psyched to be here, man. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it already.
Well, it's always great to spend some time with you. I whenever I get a chance to be with you, I always cherish it. To me, you're truly a spiritual warrior. I wonder if you could start us off by giving us an overview of your athletic accomplishments.
I'll try to keep it as brief as possible, but
well, you can tell a story.
Well, I think it starts really with my granddad, who was a professional soccer player in Scotland. He played for the Rangers, and I think that's where I inherited a lot of my athletic ability. My dad, maybe it skipped a generation, or maybe he just didn't have the timing right, because he was small like me. I'm 5'4", and when you go to Montgomery, Alabama, in the 1940s or whatever it was when they came over from Scotland, there's not a lot of sports for a small kid who only knows how to play soccer. So football and other things like that just weren't going to happen. So it skipped his generation. He was the academic, if you will. But my granddad was an amazing athlete, and even at the age of 72, I think he was the second best handball player in the nation.
Wow!
He was beat by a guy in the finals who was 51, because his age bracket started at 50 and above. So he was just a stud. And I played soccer all my life until I got to college, and then quickly realized that the writing on the wall was going to be quick as far as my lifetime and that sport was concerned. I just wasn't as good as all the other Europeans that were coming over to soccer, to America to play, and found the bicycle. And the rest is history. Honestly, the first ride I had on the bicycle was with a guy who smoked and played guitar, and he was just a friend of mine, but he kicked my ass. I mean, and I don't know if that's the ass kicking that was what motivated me, but I was like, man, I got to get better at this, and started diving into the cycling as much as I could. Started training, getting my ass kicked every time I went out on some of these group rides. Made it 100 yards farther each weekend, and that summer went away to train, also work to make some money for college, etc. And then I came back the next year and started having results. And my sophomore year after college, the Olympic Training Center invited me to come out there and be a resident athlete. And so I did that for a while, and started getting some good results, turned pro my senior year in college, and then went to Europe right after getting married to my wife, and rode bikes for several years before that ended somewhat prematurely, which maybe we'll get into as well.
So when you were riding in Europe as a professional, what kind of races were you doing?
The Tour de France type stuff, but not the Tour de France, because you have to be at a certain level, and I just wasn't at that level. I don't know that I ever was going to be, and I wasn't ready to make certain sacrifices. And if you know what I mean, that just basically the drug ones.
Yeah.
It's sad to say, but that's just the truth of the matter, and it's part of the sport as far as I'm concerned. It's like, natural bodybuilding versus what they might just call bodybuilding. I don't know. It's drugs are rampant. And I had a fear of needles, which helped me avoid that. But I also had a fear of my wife, which helped me avoid that as well.
That's probably the bigger.
Yeah, I mean, well, she was adamant about not taking anything, and that was it's easier to say no to that when she's on your side.
Yeah. Well, but you've talked about your cycling, your professional cycling, but what about your Ironman career?
Oh, well, yeah, I guess I had a second athletic career after the cycling ended. So the cycling ended because of a third concussion. We had come back from Europe in '98, and we did that for my wife to get her master's degree. She's got a master's in social work, and we did that at the University of Georgia. And so I was at home, and I was actually going to be racing for a team called Go Martin, and we were going to go out and do Redlands, which is out in California, out in your neck of the woods. But ironically enough, my father-in-law was putting up a a birdhouse, I should say, in a tree, fell off a ladder, hit his head on a metal water meter, and was in a coma for 11 days.
Wow.
Yeah. So at that point, I felt like I needed to stay with family and kind of put my cycling stuff on hold. And so I was just racing in the Southeast during that time. And so I was doing this race called the Columbia Crit for Kids. This was literally probably 2 or 3 weeks after my father-in-law was injured. And I was in the winning breakaway. We had already lapped the field. And then somebody fell off in front of me, and I hit him, just landed on my head perfectly, went into convulsions. I don't remember any of this. This is what I'm told. They stopped the race, which I don't know what you know about professional cycling racing, but they never stopped the race. So they stopped the race, eventually, I guess, scraped me off the floor, put me in a ambulance and took me to the hospital. My wife gets a call that, hey, we have your husband over here. You need to come get him. So she drove all night, picked me up in the hospital. My first memory of anything is actually her walking into the hospital room and just being so in love with what was coming in to claim me,
Yeah.
And then, so that was my third concussion. I was slurring my words. I have really no memory of about 2 weeks there. My personality was completely different for like 6 months. I had to learn how to ride the bike all over again. My equilibrium was completely lost. And, after seeing neurologists and the demands of doctors and family, they said, you have to put down the bike. So I put down the bike, and unfortunately at that point kind of lost my identity. Right then it's kind of brutal at that point to be 26 years old and having no idea who the hell you are at that point.
Yes, indeed.
But I eventually got into triathlon because I always said, even as a professional cyclist, one of these days I'm going to do Ironman. Had no idea what that entailed, but after sitting on my ass for a couple of years, I thought it's now time to get fit again and start doing something. So it was either bodybuilding or mountain biking or triathlon. And bodybuilding, I was going to be too short for, so I didn't want to look like a big round weeble wobble. With mountain biking, I tried to go to this first race, but I couldn't find it. And I got so pissed off, I called up a guy that I was coaching and said, hey, tell me where that triathlon is going to be the next day. He told me where it was. And I showed up and got 4th overall. And I was like, all right, well, that's the sport that I'm going to do now.
That's pretty cool. So how many Ironmans have you done now?
I think 7. I think that's right. I'd have to count them up, but about 7, maybe 8.
That's a lot, man. That's a lot of hard work.
Yeah. I mean, it's a long day. But look, I've never been fast, really. There are people that are faster, let's put it that way, but I think I can suffer with the best of them. And Ironman's about suffering, and it's not who's going the fastest so much as who's slowing down the least. And I did that pretty well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Your upbringing is very interesting. I'd love it if you can give us an overview of your developmental history and where your challenges were and how you ultimately created freedom within your body, your mind, and your life.
Wow. Well, I'm a latchkey kid. I came from a broken home. My parents were divorced since before I was 2, and I have literally no memory of living with my dad. So I think that probably played a huge role in who I was. And maybe that personal development that starts early and having to come home to an empty house, which might be scary. And in fact, so my house had a basement, and it was one of those basements that was complete like dirt and, not finished at all. And it was dark and just scary as hell. And I think I remember having times where I was like, all right, I'm not going to turn the light on until I go down there, and I'm not going to turn it off until I get up to the top. So I was always testing myself to make sure that, I don't know, I guess I was my own, not even man at that point because I was a boy, but my own boy. Like, I'm not going to let fear win. And I guess I was always fighting that, because if you're alone a lot, you're going to be afraid a lot, especially as a, 8, 9, 10-year-old kid coming home after school.
Yeah.
So, and my wife will joke about that. A lot of the shit that I've accomplished, if you look at it as big or monumental, it's because I've always been trying to prove my self-worth to my dad. I don't know that's necessarily true, but there's probably a ring of truth to that. All I know is I definitely enjoyed challenges, and there was the challenge of being a latchkey kid, but then there's a challenge of being the smallest person on the field. I'm 5'4" now, and when I was in elementary school, I can remember kids having to pick me up and lift me up to get water from the water fountain because I was too short to get water from the water fountain. So, and in fact, I'm sure you're familiar with growth hormone, right?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Well, I was actually one of the guinea pigs for growth hormone back in like the 80s. I think I was in 3rd grade, and my parents decided to go ahead and put me in a clinical trial of this growth hormone, which back then was from human cadavers. It wasn't synthetic. And for a week, I was getting injections, in my ass and the ports in my veins and stuff like that. And I think that's where I developed my fear of needles.
Wow.
I remember freaking out one time, and they had to strap me down in like one of those, I don't even know what you call it, like a straitjacket almost. And I remember saying, just, okay, let me out. I won't scream. I won't yell. I won't, fight. Just please let me out. So I think that's where my fear of needles came from. And I only did it for a week because I told my mom, if you don't let me, come off of this, I'm running away, because I just couldn't handle it. And it was supposed to be I think 3 shots a week until I was 18, and I was 8 at the time.
Wow, that's a long haul.
Yeah, and honestly, it's a good thing ultimately, because they were taking it from human cadavers. There's a disease, I forget what it's called, something like Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease or something like that.
Yes,
And it's like mad cow disease, but in humans, and it's because they had a dose that they took from a guy who was infected by this stuff, and obviously it was killing some people. And so up until I was about 18, my mom would get these occasional, once every year, once every 6 months, a letter from the doctor saying, hey, is he showing any signs of neurological this or neurological that? I guess the answer is debatable whether or not there was anything, but luckily I think I avoided that.
Yeah, that's interesting. I've never heard the term latchkey kid. What does that mean?
So I was coming home to a house that was locked, but I had a key, and usually I either took it with me or it was hidden. I can't remember. But you're coming home and there's no parents.
I see.
And that's not even legal these days. Like, my wife's a social worker, and if a kid is home, the kid has to have a parent under a certain age, and above a certain age, it's only for a certain amount of hours that kid can be alone. So there's a lot of trouble a kid can get into, when he's 12, 13 years old and coming home to an empty house.
Absolutely. It can result in houses burning down.
Exactly. Well, you learn the stove is hot that way, though.
Tell me a little bit about your religious upbringing and the kind of concepts that were implanted in you from that perspective.
Well, my grandparents on my mom's side were Southern Baptists, if that says anything to you.
Yeah.
My grandparents on my dad's side were Presbyterian, so I think it was a little bit lower key. But my grandparents in South Carolina, the Baptists, you couldn't say darn around them, which is really funny. So you couldn't say shit, and yet he used to say, my granddad, "Oh, Shaw," and you couldn't say Jesus Christ, but I remember my granddad saying Jiminy Cricket, and things like that. So there were things that weren't aligned in what was being taught to me, and yet what was being presented. So they were great people. I loved them. It's just I think I found at an early age that something just wasn't ringing quite true. And then I remember going to a church in about 7th grade and talking to the preacher one time, and I said to the preacher, "Hey, do you have to go to church to believe in God?" And he said, "No." And I said, "See ya, I'm out of here." and literally, other than weddings and funerals, and maybe 1 or 2 times with my wife during Christmas or Easter, just to because she really wanted me to, and I love my wife. I haven't stepped foot in a church since. I mean, it's just not where I find I'm able to commune with higher spirit. I find I can do that other places, other means.
Well, if God is God, then the universe is the church.
Exactly. And I completely believe that. And I think that's one of the things that helped me so much with sport. It's when you're killing yourself to make it to the finish line in front of a charging peloton of 200 people or whatever it is, you come very close to God. Let's put it that way. And it was a way to find that otherworldliness, that without having to being a church with a bunch of other people who, I don't know, were looking at you strange because you were dressed differently.
Yeah, exactly. Now, you and I think, am I the one that introduced you to the use of plant medicines? Yeah,
without a doubt. You're my first time I ever did anything like that. And it was an awesome experience. Was when I came out. Actually, this was before level 4, because level 4 had been canceled. There weren't enough qualified candidates, and you were gracious enough to say, "Hey, dude, come on out. Let's do some one-on-one work together." And you introduced me to that, and I think we did a sound healing, and you were very interested in helping me with my leukemia and kind of taking me to that next level of health and wellness.
What sort of experiences did that bring up in you, and what were the effects of that experience?
Paul, I think that's the first time that I, not just academically, but genuinely understood the oneness of the universe, if you will. I still have this vivid memory of you and me at your house, lying down on the grass and looking up at the beautiful sky during the day and hearing the wind, the birds, feeling the earth. I mean, and the sensation of us just almost like traveling through the universe at however many millions of miles an hour. It was, and you could just tell it was all connected. And I don't know, it sounds cheesy, but I think you almost have to have that experience to realize the truth of it. But it's so incredibly true that I wish more people could experience it.
I think one of the big challenges is, in the structure stages of consciousness, using Gebser's model, we're really heavily in the mental stage. And as you know, that largely deals with intellect, and people have gotten so trapped in ideas and constantly trying to, please teachers or please bosses or get grades or memorize things to pass tests or memorize the things they got to memorize to do at work, what have you. And so paradoxically, people are so kind of caught in what the Buddhists call the I know mind, where they actually think they know what's going on, but they've lost connection with nature, and they've lost connection with the depth of connection even in their relationships. When you look at the fact that the average marriage today only lasts 2.5 years, and the average person gets married 3 times in their lifetime, it's as though we've kind of gotten so trapped in ideas that we avoid a lot of the experiences that ultimately produce meaning. And the plant medicines break the ego structure down. They basically make the ego very porous to the flow of both the unconscious and, in my opinion, the superconscious. So they allow us to connect the dots in ways that we can't really connect them when our conscious ego mind is really running the show, which is, as you know, largely based on the ideas that were programmed into us. So all of a sudden, with the help of the right plant medicines, I feel we're actually able to experience reality as it really is, without our programmed story getting in the way.
Yeah, no, without a doubt.
Hi, this is Paul Chek, and I am super excited to share an amazing line of super nutritional products that I found called Organifi, Organifi. If you go to Organifi.com and check out their product line, they have a wide variety of excellent products. And unlike any food-based product company that's ever showed interest in sponsoring the Chek Institute or any of my courses or products or videos or any of the projects I've done that stated they were organic, when I asked them for their organic certification, I never got them. I have been through this before. When I contacted Organifi and asked to see their documentation that they were legitimately using organic source materials, very quickly I got an email with 14 organic certifications showing that their source materials are certified organic. Then I put the products to the test with my family and on my own body, and I must say I was very impressed. They have a wide variety. They have green juice, red juice. They have a product called Gold that aids with sleep, muscle aches and pains, and joint stiffness. It helps bolster your immunity. It's awesome. One of my favorites is called Pure, and it's got lion's mane. It's Baobab infused. It's great for gut health, brain performance. Lion's mane is excellent for stimulating neurogenesis. I love to give it to my son Mana. Another one that's fantastic is Immunity, which is an organic superfood product, and it supports your immune system. It tastes fantastic. I like to put these right in some water and mix them in and drink them, or put them into tea. They have a variety of great stuff like green juices, red juice. They have Organifi Gold. It aids with restless sleep, muscle aches and pains, stiff joints, bolsters your immunity. You'll wake up feeling rejuvenated if you have that in the evening. They have awesome protein powders. Angie's about to give birth to our second child, and she's been really enjoying their protein powder. Their products are safe for pregnant mothers. I'm a very picky guy, and I'm hard to impress when it comes to food products, but these guys really got me. I love the products. If you are ready to try some amazing products that can really make your life more efficient, if you don't have time to do a lot of cooking, you're a busy executive, or you're a mother and you've got lots going on and you need something to give your kids now and then that's legitimately nutritious, good for them, and organic, which means clean and high in nutrients, you can't go wrong with Organifi. Go to Organifi, ORGANIFI.com, and when you're checking out, put in Chek 20, lowercase c, lowercase h, lowercase e, lowercase k, 20, and you will get a 20% off at checkout. And you will be amazed, just like I was. Can't wait to hear your feedback. Check them out, ORGANIFI.com. When you're checking out, use the code CHEK20 for a 20% discount, and prepare to be nourished, enlivened, and amazed. I'd love to hear your feedback.
I think it's something that, like you said, starts early, and I think it's probably a little bit worse for guys than it is for women, because for whatever reason, I mean, at least in my case, you got to be a hard ass, and so you start learning fairly early on, maybe not to show emotion, maybe not to feel certain things, and I think that disconnects you more and more from the present of what's there. And when I say the present, I'm talking about, in terms of time, but I'm also talking about the gift as well, using it both meanings. And I think that's one of the biggest losses that at least we have as men, and really I'm sure women do it as well, but have. And if we could learn to just open ourselves up, like you just said, and become more porous, I think we'd be able to accept everything that we were seeing and feeling, and probably see and feel a lot more and stuff that's not there. I mean, you probably know these stats better than I do, Paul, but we're only cognizant of what a minute percentage of what's really out there.
The ego is only about 5% of our working consciousness. So the analogy I often use is an iceberg. What we think we know and what we're sensing as we're listening to this podcast or looking around is only about 5% of what we're actually taking in through our well, through our senses, but through our also subtle energy senses, through our energy field. So, you're dealing with, I mean, an outdated figure. There, I've heard other figures that are much more grandiose, but I don't know them exactly. But in my physiology, some of my physiology texts, I've got a great German physiology text, and it says that the human being on average is processing 10 billion bits of information a second.
Right.
And to put that in perspective, a typewritten page is about 1,000 bits. So when you divide 10 billion by 1,000, that's a shitload of pages we're able to process every second.
Yeah.
Out of which the conscious mind only selects the 10 to 100 bits per second, largely based on what we perceive we need to know to stay alive. In other words, avoid threats.
Right.
But, when you, like Nassim Haramein, I saw him in a lecture say that the human body has 30 billion biochemical reactions a second. All that's being processed by the unconscious mind. I believe Bruce Lipton says the unconscious mind is about 1 million times more powerful in its processing power than the conscious mind. And Nassim Haramein really makes a good point. He says what we call the unconscious should be called the conscious, because one, it keeps us alive, and two, it doesn't do a lot of the stupid things that the conscious mind does. It doesn't start wars and doesn't destroy its own food supply and things like that. But then we have the super conscious, which is really the super conscious is really what's behind it all, processing information. So then you get into non-local communication and really the newer functions of the mind that quantum physics has brought out. I'm curious, though. I know you've done some ayahuasca experiences. What would you describe as your experience using the ayahuasca?
Well, if I learned about oneness when I was with you, it took it to a whole new level, my friend. It was really intense. I mean, so I'll tell you too. So I was working with a shaman down in Hawaii, and you have 3 opportunities to take. The first time everybody takes the ayahuasca, and then you got a second and third opportunity if you want. I somehow missed the second opportunity. I don't know if I was out and walking around outside, because I did that a little bit, or if I was completely asleep, because this is Hawaii time. So we start the ayahuasca ceremony at like 9 or 10 p.m., which is already, I don't know, 5 or 6 a.m. Atlanta time. So it's possible I was asleep even. But nothing was happening to me. And part of me was disappointed because I'd gone down to Hawaii to have this experience. And part of me also was disappointed because I wondered if it was a failing on my part in that, truly being able to let go. Right. I mean, because here I am, some people might think that a lot of what I've accomplished is because I want to have absolute control over everything. And that's not exactly true. But I do know that I think letting go and just letting what happens happen is hard for anybody, but it's a state that I think I've tried to become more familiar with anyways. So I'm sitting there, and then all of a sudden the shaman says, "Okay, last call." And I'm like, "Last call? What the hell?" So I go up and I go ahead and take, and then I sit down on my bed where I am, and I'm seated up, and I have like a Native American Afghan, if you can see that, like a multicolored Afghan on me. It's quite chilly down there in the night, and I'm looking at this Afghan, and then all of a sudden the Afghan starts to move. And I'm like, all right, now something's finally happening, okay? And then the Afghan shapes into the shape of like a cat, and then the cat becomes like a jaguar. And then this jaguar opens his mouth, and inside his mouth is this big gigantic wormhole. And I start going down this wormhole into, eventually it changes to like a circuit board. And then the circuit board changes into like the sinew and muscles and ligaments and tendons of the body. I'm just deep, man. It's freaking awesome. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And then I'm the last person to take too. So the shaman is eventually, he takes us out of the experience as well, but I'm already deep in it at this point, and I don't want to come out. And I hadn't moved my body since that last sip of ayahuasca, I was just holding on. My eyes were closed. I didn't even realize that you can open your eyes, but you can, and I can talk about that later. But all of a sudden I was feeling this itch on my cheek, but I didn't want to itch it because I was like, if I move, I'm going to take myself out of where I am and back to the physical. It's the last thing I wanted to do because I was really enjoying this experience and I wanted to see what grandmother was going to give me, So I reach up finally and I touch my cheek to get this itch, and it wasn't an itch. It was a tear.
Oh, wow. Cool.
And yeah. And what that tear was ultimately was I was crying because of the sheer freaking beauty of everything I was seeing and the understanding of, again, that complete oneness. And ultimately when the shaman kind of took us out of the experience and I still had my eyes closed and he said, like, anybody wants to share, people started sharing what they experienced. And I didn't actually voice any of my experiences because, one, I didn't want to come out of where I was. I thought that would bring me to the physical. Two, they were saying what I wanted to say. And three, I realized they were me.
Amen.
So and so what else was there to say? So I was just sitting there and we were these ethereal beings floating up in heaven, if you will, talking about the experience that we together had created and laughing almost at the sheer, coincidence, if you want to call it that, but it wasn't a coincidence of everything we had created to bring us all together at that one point in time. And you're just like, this is effing amazing. I mean, I don't know if I can throw F-bombs out here, but
I think they can handle it.
All right, good, because it was fucking amazing, dude. And the second experience was even more so. So I mean, we could talk about that if you want, but anyways, it was great, and I look forward to it. And it's the plant medicine is the only thing I can truly say is actual medicine. Everything else is actually more of a drug, if you will.
Amen. Yes, it's true. So your second experience, what sort of realizations and experiences did you have that were either different or took you beyond the first? Typically people, as they do more legitimate ceremonies like this, they learn to relax into it and not be so afraid and allow it to unfold. Did you find that the second one allowed you to be more accepting and take you deeper?
Well, I definitely went deeper, which was surprising because I thought I went really deep the first time. But so I went into it with an intention, right? And I think that's where if people have bad trips, it's because they didn't go into it with a solid intention. And my first intention was basically release judgment, restore connection. Okay.
That's a great one.
I was pleased with it. My wife helped me come up with it. And it wasn't so much judgment of others, Paul. It was really more judgment of myself. Because when I'm working with others and my work with others has led me to believe that most of us are doing the best we can with what we have, right? So I'm not judging others, but I also seem to have a hard time not judging myself, if you will.
Right.
So I wanted to, that was the intention for the first one, release judgment, restore connection. And I think I found that. Well, my next one, I almost kept that same intention, but at the last moment, I decided, okay, my intention is going to be, grandmother, show me my ideal vibration, okay, my ideal frequency, and whatever that is, and I'm just going to accept it. And so I took the first hit. Nothing really happened, nothing much. Although I could say something about it too, but anyways, so I'm there for the second hit, and I go ahead and take it, and I'm like, okay, nothing's happened, and then damn, all of a sudden, Paul, fucking deep, man, deep. Like I went back to my birth. Okay, like there was this time, so we're in this communal area with like a little bit of a tent on top, covering on top. And all of a sudden it starts really raining really hard on the tent. But when we're doing that, I was the egg, and those were the sperm coming to fertilize me. And it was just, they were pounding at the egg. So I was there during conception. I mean, childbirth. I became man, woman. I knew what it was like to be past, present, future, good, bad. So if you ask anybody that was down there with me, they'll tell you one of the things they remember most is me laughing my ass off. And one of the reasons I was laughing my ass off is because I was just mesmerized and tripping out over how how awesome the world is for the most part. How funny it was that I tried to stay ahead of what grandmother was showing me, because I think I knew where she was going, or I'd studied this, or I'd read this, etc. And as soon as I thought I knew where she was going, she said, "No, you don't. You're going back this direction." And it was funny as hell. So I was laughing and laughing. People kept hearing that, and it would start making them crack up too. But then twice the laughter that was normally joyful, 2 times it came out like like angry, evil laughter. I'm like, where the fuck did that come from? And you know where it came from? It came from me, because we all
absolutely.
have it. It's the good, the bad. It's everything, man. I mean, but it was crazy. I was like, where's that coming from? And so the whole time I was on this verge of laughter, I was on this verge of yawning, and I was on this verge of throwing up, because as you know, ayahuasca, they call it La Purga, and I kept expecting to throw up. And there were times where I thought for sure I was throwing up, and people were throwing up all around me. The shaman threw up. And again, part of me wanted to throw up, because you want to release. You want to release hatred. You want to release guilt. You want to release anxiety and fear and all this other stuff that you want to get rid of. I wanted to release disease, so part of me wanted to throw up, but it never truly happened, even though I thought it did. But I got to tell you this, Paul. Hopefully I'm not talking your ear off.
No, that's what we're here to do, man. This is,
right.
I'm interested because, as you know, there's a reemergence of the psychedelic craze. And I really think that the things you're describing are essentially the medicine that the spirit of the plant medicines is coming to help us heal, to get past all this judgment and blockage and confusion and isolation and segregation. I mean, look at the rate of suicide, and look at all these stats on how all the things like Facebook and tweeting and twatting and twitting, it's causing more and more isolation and more anxiety. And, people have, hundreds of friends on Facebook, but they're more isolated than ever, because we're getting trapped in our head. We're getting trapped in information technology. We're getting trapped in gadgets, and we're forgetting how to live and how to love and how to actually see and feel the beauty that life really is. And so, I'm digging the story, and I would imagine most people are.
Well, good, because I hope they're connecting with this, because you're right. It's about the connection, and this is going to blow your mind. So at the end of the ceremony, when finally people are going back, it's morning time. I'm going back to my cabin. I pass by the bathroom, and I'm going to go to the bathroom. I feel the need to go to the bathroom. Haven't thrown up or anything like that, but I need to go to the bathroom. So I need you to understand too, Paul, that before going on this trip, I did a week of basically vegetarianism, okay, to kind of clean the system and get ready for what was going to happen. And this was at the advice of the shaman. And then the whole time I'm down there, you're having a light breakfast and a light lunch and basically no dinner. And it was so very little food.
Right.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And yet I felt, completely invigorated, and it was great. Didn't feel like I needed much food or sleep, honestly. But so I go to the bathroom after this, after everybody else is throwing up around me, etc., being a little disappointed I couldn't throw up. And I sit in the toilet, and I have the biggest shit. You would not believe it. So big. I'm not joking. And I know it's disgusting for people, TMI, but I stand up, I flush it, because I'm like, if I do all of it right now, it's going to, clog up the toilet. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I sit back down, finish my business, and then I go back to my cabin. And the first thing I'm going to do is call my wife and just share with her. Because my biggest disappointment about going down there was not being able to share that experience with her. But so I call her up, and before I can say anything, she's like, man, it was crazy. This morning I woke up and I don't know what was going on. I haven't eaten anything different or anything, but man, I had the worst case of, diarrhea and stuff. And you know what that was? That's our connection. And she was purging just like I was purging.
Yeah, she was in sympathetic resonance.
Yeah, I mean, it's freaking amazing. I mean, it's crazy, because she doesn't have, she has good bowel habits typically. There's no reason for this. She was purging just like me. It was insane.
Yeah, I've had quite a number of medicine journeys where I was so deep into God and seeing the absolute humor. I mean,
yeah.
I tell people God's got the greatest sense of humor there is. And I've had journey experiences that were so intense when I saw how even the darkest, most evil things are really God just, acting out through all of us. We're wearing these masks and just really we're inside of this amazing play that all is designed to elevate our conscious awareness of who and what we are and give us a chance to express our creativity and to really experience the love and connection in this three-dimensional world where separation becomes so palpably real, unlike when we're in those higher realms where we're intimately connected and there's not even this sense of disconnection. But when you come down into it and you also have the experience of the oneness and experiencing the consciousness of the divine, and I have laughed so hard and simultaneously cried so hard.
Yeah.
My muscles were sore for days. I mean, it was like somebody had beaten me up because the intensity of the laughter and the tears. I mean, I've literally cried buckets while I was laughing my ass off.
Yeah.
At just how the seemingly saddest and scariest things, when you actually can see them in the context of the whole, turn out to be meaningful, mind-blowing, beautiful, intense, amazing. And a lot of people might be thinking, shit, well, how can something like someone that you love dying or someone getting a serious disease, how can all that be so funny? But when you realize that when you get behind the ego or the filtration system, it's all, we don't die. We're already in a state of perfection. What we are is really the divine, and everything else is an illusion that's designed to make it meaningful so that we can grow and become conscious of our potential as individuals. Because in that state of union, there isn't the contrast that there is as we go down into the 3 dimensions and lower dimensions of reality.
Right. I mean, and more people need to hear that. They need to experience it maybe because they're not going to believe it as much until they truly, it's academic. It's not personal. It's not it's not true knowing until they actually experience it. But you're right. You're exactly right.
Well, it's like all these people that have their religious attitudes or their program beliefs that say, oh, you can't have spiritual experiences on drugs or psychedelics. And I say, okay, well, if you want to test that theory, I can support you. Or I know people that can for sure.
Right.
And so far, every single yogi and advanced meditator. I remember one time I had a Buddhist monk come to me, and through channels he had found that I might be somebody that could help him. And so one thing led to another, but he said, I keep hearing about all these people having these plant medicine journeys and having experiences that they say are deeper than we're likely to get on meditation. And he says, quite frankly, I don't believe it. I just smiled. I said, is that right? He said, but I want to test it. So long story made short, I arranged for him to have a ceremony.
Okay.
And let me tell you, when he got into the depths of it, man, this guy was screaming so loud, and he was just in complete terror because as the medicine was kicking in and he was losing his ego.
Yeah.
He thought he was dying.
Yeah.
But he realized as he got to the right point in the ceremony where he wasn't dying, but that he became one with all that is. But the punchline is when he came out of it, he just looked at me and shook his head and he said, oh my God. He said, I meditated. I was a monk for 2 years. I meditated every day, often for hours, 8 hours at a time, long time fasting, the whole thing.
Yeah.
He said, I never even got close to that. He said, there's not even a comparison. He says, I would imagine I have to meditate for years and years in a cave to get an experience like that. I said, well, Mother Nature has her own mechanisms for saving you from the cave. And I quoted Terence McKenna, who said, you can sweep the monastery floor for 7 years, or you can do one hit of DMT. It's up to you.
Right.
But, I think that these things are important. But as you know, I'm also one that warns people, don't just do this foolishly or do it with someone that's not skilled. And, I've had too many people to count come back from their jungle experiences completely scrambled, lost, and broken, because there's a real art and science to dosing and creating the right environment and keeping people safe and knowing how to deal with people when they're unconscious, because the unconscious is Pandora's box. So what people call a bad trip is actually really just a chance to see all your programming and all your false beliefs and see the behaviors that you are expressing in relationship to other people that really aren't serving you or them.
Yeah.
But something
I agree, Paul. I mean, I would, you know me, I haven't done a freaking lick of drugs anywhere. I mean, I'm as clean as a whistle.
Yeah.
And I went into this having researched it quite a bit, talked to another student of yours, Nicole Devaney, I guess her name is.
Devaney, yeah.
Yeah, Devaney. Talked with her, did some reading on the subject, a lot of talking to other people who had done stuff. Obviously, I had some experience and some knowledge from you, etc. And the shaman, the shaman. So the fact that y'all knew each other gave me that much more confidence. Otherwise, I don't know that I would have taken this chance, but I do think you need to do it with somebody who knows what the hell they're doing, because otherwise it could end up very badly.
Yes, indeed. And, the thing is a lot of people, I mean, I can understand the social kind of stigma because most people don't have the knowledge. Like my mother, for example, she has a really hard time with the fact that I use any kind of plant medicines, even though I have a medicine man spirit guide license. I'm part of a Native American council. I work within the confines of the council's directives under the federal guidelines for healing ceremonies. So I'm not doing anything illegal or dangerous. I'm really just helping people using the tool chest that nature put in front of us. But it wouldn't matter how much evidence I put in front of my mother. I've given her mountains of things to read, and she just sort of turns a blind eye to it and says, you can't use that kind of stuff. It's all drugs and blah, blah, blah. That's not real spiritual development. And a lot of people have those opinions, but until you understand that the typical kind of classification drug is what you use to cover up pain or alter your consciousness so you don't have to deal with the crisis that you're creating for yourself, or to compensate for not taking responsibility for yourself, or, to use drugs effectively. I mean, there's a purpose for drugs. I mean, if you're, I remember when I broke my left leg in 5 places cliff diving, the pain was very, very intense, and they gave me morphine. And when the morphine would wear off, the pain was just brutal. So I would push the little button to the nurse, give me some more of that morphine.
Yeah.
And that's what drugs are supposed to be used for. But unfortunately, as you know, due to the amount of money being made off the things, the drug industry and the medical industry is now just avoiding the issue of real healing and turning everybody into drug addicts. If you got a pimple, you need a drug. If you got a wrinkle, you need a drug. If your ass itches, take this drug. So the whole concept of drugs has been very confused with regard to legitimate plant medicines.
Yeah.
And I think, part of the reason that people have all these biases is because of programming. But the reality of it is, the more biased you are like that, the more beneficial a plant medicine experience is probably going to be, because it's a measure your bias and your resistance to wise counsel, scholarly people writing massive books and thousands of articles and piles of research showing how healing these things can be used in a proper setting by skilled guides. So when people actually do have the experience, a lot of them ultimately have to face their own embarrassment for how dogmatic they've been and how wrong they've been. Yeah,
I mean, I think that would probably go hand in hand with some of the people that I was down there with. They worked down there, and so they'd done multiple sessions. One person told me, this was after my second session, that was his 100th session, and yet that was the first time he was able to go as deep as we all went. And I think that's because of, again, layers of programming that we all have, and so everybody's experience is going to be a little bit different, and maybe each time a little bit more therapeutic, just based off what you need. Grandmother's going to know exactly what you need, and she's going to give it to you.
Yeah, there's no question. And the idea or the concept of past lives, triggers a lot of people because there's a lot of confusion about that, mostly due to our scientific materialistic programming. But I know from my own experiences, I've done over 400 ceremonies with plant medicines myself in my career. And one, you can never, ever get to where you think it's going to happen. The day you get cocky and think, oh, I got this, is the day you're going to get your ass handed to you.
Yeah.
Two, we have so much programming, not only from this lifetime, but past lifetimes. In order for us to really steam clean our heart and get to where we can really live and love fully and forgive and support and grow and become a real citizen of the world, we have to go through a fair bit of healing. And I've had experiences, for example, when my brother committed suicide, it was intensely painful for my whole family. And it was certainly to this day, I still blow smoke to him every morning and connect to him and send him love on his journey. But I remember the first time that was brought up to me by the plant medicines, and they were helping me heal, but the pain was so fucking intense, man. I was just I was crying so hard and felt so much remorse and so much sadness and so much pain. And finally, when that medicine wore off after about 6 hours, in this case, I felt a lot better. I felt like I'd taken a lot of burden off. I felt like the veil between my brother and I was a lot thinner. And, and I thought I'd healed that, but long story made short, it took 5 future ceremonies, which did not come in sequence. All of a sudden, boom, I would get hit. I'm like, oh my God, I cannot believe I still have this much pain left. And I would go through it again. And when I went through my midlife crisis at 50, I was doing a ceremony, a healing ceremony with Angie, and she's a highly trained shaman, as I imagine you probably know.
Yeah.
And I think just because of the safety and security of having her as my guide, I went through a tremendous clearing of the pain of my brother's suicide. So that was like the 5th time. Fortunately, that was about 8 years ago now, and I've never had to revisit that one again. But the point being is we definitely get caked in layers, and spirit, in my experience, won't unveil more to you than you're really capable of handling if you breathe into it and you open your heart. If you resist it, then you can just rest assured she'll be waiting for you.
Yeah. No, I mean, that's what I was told. Like, if you see something that scares you during this time, during your journey, go face it. Don't run from it, and that's definitely what I tried to do. I actually have a question for you, Paul, about this. I'd love to get your take.
Sure.
So during the second ceremony where I went so deep, there was a guy sitting next to me, and he was from Bali, and he had given me this stone. I forget what it's called, but it absorbs energy from the sun, and so it literally glows at night. It's
I've
bluish,
seen them.
bluish.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he said, just hold on to this. You might find it
Soothing.
interesting soothing to have during the ceremony, etc. So I took it into one of my hands. I guess it was it's the left hand, the receiving hand, the right hand's the giver.
Yeah, left hand's feminine. Sometimes they're called moonstones.
Okay. So I was holding it in my hand and just kept it there the entire ceremony. But there came a point where I looked over at my friend next to me, and his soul kept getting up and walking into this light. Getting up and walking to this light, and the shaman was singing and playing guitar and stuff, and some of the songs like just let it go, walk to the light, etc. And I'm not lying to you, my friend. I thought at that point, I'm choosing right now between life and death. And as you well know, I've been fighting for my life for 15 years, and it gets tiring sometimes. And the song kept going on. I kept wanting the ceremony to be over because I wasn't scared. What I was realized that heaven is so awesome, and it has everything that you could ever want, good, bad, a constant, I mean, this sounds crazy, but I was in a constant state of like orgasmic ecstasy the entire time, laughing my ass off, screaming. And I was wanting to enjoy all that. And I kept wanting to go into the light, but the only thing that kept me here is wanting to share this with Diana, my wife. And, and I was really scared that, scared that if I walked in, that would be it. And I still believe to this day that if I had walked into that light, I'd be gone. I would have just gone into nothingness or whatever, and I would have died, and that would have been okay. And I think honestly, my wife would have understood because I felt like she was there with me, but I felt like maybe something that I haven't finished whatever it is that I'm on this earth to do, on this plane to do. And so I stayed. But I really feel like if I'd walked into the light, I'd be gone. And I wonder if you think that's just a bunch of bullshit or what?
No, I've had many of those experiences, and I have gone into the absolute, completely lost my sense of knowing I was even alive. Basically, by the way, was that on ayahuasca?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So ayahuasca's got a couple of names. One is vine of the soul, and sometimes it's referred to as the vine of death because it actually takes you through a death experience. And so what you're really having, if you study the work of Ray Moody or some of the researchers on reincarnation like Ian Stevenson, you'll find that the stories that people tell in their near-death experiences and the experiences that there's also what are called shared death experiences, and there's thousands of them recorded now where people who are with family members or people that they love, say in a hospital or as the person's dying, they somehow go into the death experience with them, and they experience exactly what NDE survivors describe, except they had no drugs or anything. They were just standing there. But again, due to the sympathetic resonance, they're actually shifted consciously to being one with the person dying.
Right.
So the thing is that I remember in one specific ceremony, I was just really, really deep, and I'm facing the abyss of the absolute, and I could feel a vortex pulling me into what I would describe as the 0 point, where everything just completely and utterly disappears. And I just felt if I go one iota further, I'm going to lose everything. I won't know who I am, what I am, where I am. I'll never know if I had a family. I will be completely and utterly gone.
Yeah.
And the presence of the divine or of God was with me. And I said, I'm scared. I said, I've got my at this time I didn't have Mana and Zoe. I said, I've got Paul Jr. and I know he needs my help. I've got my institute. I've got, I really feel an obligation to support the world with the knowledge. And I feel like I came to the world to do that. And the voice of the divine said to me, as long as you want to be in charge and make the choices to guide your life, I am completely devoted to supporting you. But if you want to know what it is to be one with me, you must let go and trust me.
Right, right.
And so at that particular time, I was too afraid. But in other experiences, I was able to completely let go. And it's just, there's not really words you can use to describe it. But you basically have to be brave enough to die. When I'm, conducting healing ceremonies where, particularly with more experienced people, I always tell people, in general, if you're not ready to die, you should not go into an ayahuasca ceremony or a plant ceremony. Because if you're not ready to die, then you're not ready to let go of your ego, and you're never really going to get the benefits of the divinity that's always with us, but we're not able to listen to because we're too busy in our heads being God ourselves. But having been through those experiences, what I've found is, there's the story of life, and I mean the grand story, life itself, is something that's created by all of us, past, present, and future. We're all co-authors in it. And what I found is the number of times, and I've been into the absolute with no drugs, no medicines. I've done it with Tai Chi. I've done it with meditation. Actually, my first total union experience where I became one with the universe and just had a mind-boggling experience. Was when Paul Jr. was being born, and I was watching him come out of the birth canal, and as his little body came out of Sue's vagina and womb, I just, all of a sudden, it was as though the best way I could describe it was I became a living rainbow that reached to the edges of infinity. And I just burst with tears of joy and connection, and just the blessing of, I was only 18 years old, but something just split me wide open. And it's really the kind of experience you might have on DMT or ayahuasca. But, so, the point I'm making is that to really let go, one has to be ready to die. But the deeper point that I'm making is it seems like you will die. In fact, the experience you're describing is exactly what I see when I'm doing shamanic work with people. Like, a lot of people come to me because someone in their family's died. They're worried about it. They want to find out how they are. And a lot of them get caught in the middle realm because they've got so much religious programming, and they fear that they've sinned so much, and that, that basically God will burn them in hell. So they actually are afraid of the light. So they won't go in it. And some of these people can hover in these middle dimensions and become ghosts for, 3, 4, 5, 600 years, because they're so conditioned to believe that they're afraid of God, which is the most, for me, that's the proof of the old saying, the devil's favorite place to hide is in the church, because for religion to program it into people, I believe that is an ultimate sin. But what I'm really saying is that when you get inside of it deep enough and you develop enough legitimate spiritual trust in what God really is, not some idea written on paper, but a legitimate experience of God, you come to realize that the ego will give you the experience like mine did, thinking, oh my God, if I go one step further, I'm going to be annihilated. But once you get inside the absolute, it's not like you're conscious. There's nothing to be conscious of there, because there's no duality anymore. You're in a state of non-dual experience,
right,
which you can't describe with words, because there's no I-thou relationship. You're just one with it. You're just pure, unadulterated awareness, pure, unadulterated consciousness. But when I come out and I meditate on what happened, what I realize is that we're all co-writing the story, and that even if you enter into the absolute of God, that the story itself pulls us back. In other words, if our part of the play hasn't concluded and we still want to participate, paradoxically, it's the people, like you said, your wife or my friends or my students or my family, or all the souls that have soul contracts with us that we may not even met yet, that draw us back in out of love and say, please come play with us before you dissolve into the divine ocean. So I think that the real point that I'm trying to share to answer your question is, we're so used to being in our own heads and thinking things out for ourselves and solving problems for ourselves. And because of that, to the degree that any medicine or experience dissolves that ego structure, we think we're going to die, and we think that death is going to be terminal, because that's what it feels like. But it takes a pretty seriously big set of spiritual balls to pass through the gate of that needle from the relative to the absolute, where there is just no I-thou anymore, because you have to have complete trust. And having been through that experience, many times now, I come to realize that we're all doing this together, and we're all doing this to really become aware of what love is, which paradoxically you can't do until you realize what love isn't.
Yeah.
And the higher you go closer to God, there is no concept of what love isn't. It's all, the closer you get to God, the more unconditional love you get.
It's nothing but love.
Right. So paradoxically, there's everything, but you can't perceive it as this or that. You are just one with it. Anything else is a condition.
Because you can't contrast it, right?
And and so that's exactly what the story of Adam and Eve is. Eating from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, they didn't know they were naked because they were unconscious. But once they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, all of a sudden they realized they were naked. Well, that's what consciousness is. And paradoxically, that's the only way God can actually be conscious that it is God. And that's really what we are. We're like neurons in the mind of God experiencing what it is, because there's nothing outside of God to have an experience with. By definition, God is that for which there is no other. So the only experience it can have is inside of itself. And paradoxically, the only experience we can have is inside of ourselves. You might be talking to me right now and listening to me, but you're only hearing me inside yourself. If you look out your window or you look around the room, you might see things. I'm looking at paintings on the wall and sculptures by my mother and beautiful mountain views. But the reality of it is those things are only happening inside of me.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean the mountain's not there. But it means if I wasn't here to experience it for all intents and purposes, it wouldn't be here.
Right.
So it's only through consciousness, which creates the illusion of separation, that we can actually come to realize what we couldn't realize when we were in a state of unity. And ultimately, through one life or many lives, whichever way you want to slice it, we can get to the point where we become conscious enough so that when we die, we can maintain the consciousness. And then we become truly self-realized. Then we become a Buddha or an awakened person. And then at that moment, God celebrates its knowing of what it is, because simultaneously, our awareness of what God is God's awareness, as paradoxical as that seems. But I cannot find evidence for anything more true than that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, you've had a pretty tough journey. I mean, we haven't touched on this yet, but I think it's time to kind of take the old cap off the story here. Tell us about the whole situation when you got diagnosed with leukemia, and how did that, I mean, what tell us about that journey? I remember that. I mean, that was intense, man. And leukemia is not something very many people survive. So
yeah,
that had to have been a pretty wild journey for you, especially as an elite athlete, to realize that you were suffering from a very serious disease. Take us on that journey.
Well, that's the craziest thing is, you think you're an athlete, you think you're healthy, and literally as clean as a whistle. And honestly, I was already kind of deep into the Chek paradigm of treating my body well, because I started studying with you probably in 2000 or 2001. I can't remember. And I was diagnosed in 2004. But what happened is I was doing Ironman Lake Placid and had an incredible swim, incredible bike, and then started the run and just completely fell apart. And up until that point, I'd never, I'd quit one race in my life, my first European professional race, and would never quit again after that. And I wasn't going to quit, but pain got so brutal that 15 miles into the marathon, I kind of pulled off the course and then walked back to my hotel room where my wife was watching the race on TV, and just knocked on the door. She opened it. I just fell into her arms, just crying like a freaking baby. Because I couldn't believe I had to quit, but I did. And then we go home to Atlanta and get some, doctor visits going and blood work and stuff. And my white blood cells were 45,000, I think, or something like that. They eventually peaked up at 110,000. And for reference, they should be no higher than about 10, usually between 4 and 10.
That's a big difference.
Yeah. And what's crazy is, I mean, you've been a triathlete. You started off as a triathlete at one point in your career or athletic career.
Yeah, I've done quite a number of them. Yeah, I was the Army's representative in the Hilton Head National Championships in '86.
Okay, so you understand that you're at the point where a lot of times you're walking around tired because you train your ass off, right?
Yeah.
And there's probably times where I wasn't training as intelligently as I should, etc. But I think I was doing better than most considering my background and stuff. Anyways, so there's this insidious, creeping of increasing levels of fatigue, and you don't know that you're tired until all of a sudden you're freaking, it hits you, straight in the face. But anyways, so the interesting thing is, I got the call from my doctor on a Friday PM, and so when your doctor calls you on a Friday night at like 8 PM, you know that the results are not going to be good.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, you need to come in, but we think you have, well, he didn't tell me what he thought. He's like, but your white blood cells are extremely elevated. I said, how elevated? He's like 45,000. And I know enough about the body to realize what that meant as far as cancer. I didn't know exactly the type of leukemia, but it's Friday, and what I do on Saturday, I go train, because that's what I do. And I'll tell you, the only thing that changed between the Friday and the Saturday of going to train was the knowledge that I was sick. And that bicycle ride was like I was carrying a freaking 45-pound plate on my shoulders. It was so incredibly hard. And it just shows you the mental aspect of, the weight that we carry when we have that stress on us, whether it be bad news of health or bad news of financial or whatever. It was brutal. And things only got worse from there, Paul. I mean, got to the point where I couldn't crawl upstairs without being completely out of breath, and went through a period of approximately 3 days where, on a scale of 1 to 10, I had bone pain, which was everywhere, so fingertips down to toes, bone pain that was a constant 8, sometimes 9, sometimes 10. And I was like, this ain't worth it. I'm happy to just end it right now.
Yeah, that's intense.
I mean, and I think I have a decent pain threshold, but it was just, if this is what life is, this sucks,
As a professional cyclist, man, I'll just interject and say, I think you know enough about me. I've done a lot of intense athletic competitions, and I was an elite soldier, and I've pushed myself to extreme levels. I've never had more pain than doing a 25-mile time trial in cycling and pushing myself to the extreme and literally feeling my whole body drowning in lactic acid and metabolic waste. And the level that you have to push yourself at to be at the level you were at as a cyclist, for you to say that you were, ready to throw the towel in, that's a real level of saying this was bad, dude.
Yeah. I mean, and it was also the fact that, the first 5 weeks after being diagnosed, we were trying to do some just pure holistic treatment and stuff. I was being monitored by a hematologist, obviously, but I didn't want to pollute my body with anything that was synthetic or chemical or otherwise. And I understand now that there's, there's a nice area where the homeopathic and the holistic perspective can work with a conventional medicine. But then I just wasn't ready to take anything that wasn't healthy for my body. And in 5 weeks, we went through $10,000 out of pocket. And I was like, this can't last very long either. I can't afford that. I was also working, sick as a dog. In fact, here's a funny story. So this was during 2004, and we had, I think 2, maybe 4 hurricanes come through Atlanta during that year. And we ended up losing, I think 3 trees in my front yard. But I was at work one time. I was sick with a cold because my immune system was shot, meaning just completely, but I had to make money because that's the only thing that was paying for my medical fees at the time.
And feeding your family.
And feeding my family too, yeah. So I get this call right as I get in my car to come home. It's late at night. It's pouring down rain. It's cold. And my wife's crying on the other end. And she says, baby, we've been out of power for a couple of hours. I've been bailing out the basement, the sump pump down the basement. And I can't, we need to get something. So can you go by Home Depot and get a generator? And the last thing I want to do at this point was, not come home. But I was like, all right, yeah. So I went to Home Depot. No freaking generators, of course, because everybody had gotten a generator at that point.
Right.
So I go to my cousin's house, he's the guy who built our house, and I pick up a generator for him. We put it in my back seat because it won't fit in my trunk. I'm driving over to the house. I'm thinking I'm driving carefully, but long story short, by the time I get to the house, the generator's turned over. The gas is spilled out all in my car. The freaking no electricity. Our basement's flooding. I'm sick as a dog. We got no money. And on top of everything, I have leukemia and I'm dying. And I'm just like, what the fuck? You just had to laugh. I mean, it was so, I was like, this is definitely a Job experience as far as biblical Job.
Yes, indeed.
God's definitely tested me. And I don't know what the test was at the time, but it was a brutal experience. And I was happy that those days are behind me,
Yeah. Now, interestingly, what I'm hearing you say, if I'm right, you found that there is a time and a place for Western medicine.
Yeah, I mean, again, I think you told me this. There's no such thing as a malprescribed drug, a malprescribed medicine, a malprescribed food. Or sorry, not a bad, I should say,
Yeah.
but it's just how they're
Yeah,
prescribed.
there's no such thing as a bad drug or a bad exercise, only an incorrectly prescribed drug or exercise.
Exactly. And so I'm on a oral chemo. It's called Gleevec. And it's the first targeted chemo that they've developed. And now they've got even more second and third and fourth generation ones. So that's what ultimately put me in remission as far as hematologic remission 17 days after I started taking it. So that shows you how powerful it is. However, I will say that it is my background with the Chek Institute training with proper nutrition and lifestyle that has allowed me, one, to tolerate the injustice of the chemo.
Yes.
To two, be on the lowest dose of the chemo as opposed to the highest dose, and doses in between, of course. And then also, there aren't any people with leukemia, or there weren't at the time, that were doing what I was doing, which was eventually coming back to triathlon and racing the Hawaii Ironman, and then going on to win an Ironman and other stuff. Like most of the people that I was seeing at the doctor's office and at MD Anderson, they've got masks on their face, lost all their hair, they're in wheelchairs. And I mean, I'm blessed and I'm lucky, but I think some of that's because of how I've treated my body leading up to the disease, having the disease, and then after diagnosis, of course.
Yes. Yeah. It's and you were working through this whole thing. I remember talking to you and talking to people. I ran into a couple of people that had mentioned to me that they had seen you as a client and that, you were really struggling, but you were still keeping a smile on your face, which was a miracle to hear in itself. So, your holistic underpinning, as you say, certainly seems to have given you a depth of reserves that most people just don't have. In fact, one of my best friends in school, Steve Clark. In fact, the longest hike I ever did in the mountains, I did with Steve Clark. I think we were both 16. He died when he was 17. He got diagnosed with leukemia, and he wasn't but 3 or 4 months later, he was dead. And, leukemia is it's not a pretty diagnosis. I mean, the chances of surviving that don't look good for most people. And for you to be able to work through that and put up with all you did, and the financial pressures and the stress that creates in a family, and the fear, and to be able to not only use the lower doses of chemo, but come out and go back to competitive Ironman triathlons is pretty freaking amazing. And I really think that your DVD documentary really, I think, is a powerful source of inspiration for anybody out there.
Yeah, that I mean, the documentary is called "Living Is Winning," and it's actually a buddy of mine who is a filmmaker, and when I qualified for Hawaii, at first I came back to triathlon in 2005 after the diagnosis in August of 2004, and then it's funny because I told myself I wasn't getting into the water until I was out of, or in, I should say, hematologic remission, meaning my white blood cells were normal, because I was scared of the chlorine. I knew it wasn't necessarily a good thing for me.
Right.
So I was avoiding anything that was going to be added stress to my system. But the idea of triathlon and the goal of racing again gave me a little something to shoot for, and that much more motivation. Not that life shouldn't be, or that family shouldn't be, but it was something that drew me. Let's put it that way.
Yes.
And I can remember too, Paul, going to my first, or like my white blood cells are finally normal. I'm going to go swim for the first time. So I drive 20 minutes to go to the pool. I get in the shower, rinse off, put on my swimsuit, go to the pool. I'm like, all right, here we go. I'm going to do I don't know how many hours of swimming. I did one lap across the pool. I was freaking exhausted. I was like, all right, I'm done. And that was the start of my comeback to triathlon. One lap across the pool.
That sounds sounds exactly like my entry to triathlon.
Right. Probably a lot of people's entries into triathlon.
I never really learned to swim properly as a kid. So my father drowned when I was 8, and I had this constant morbid voice in my head telling me, you must learn to swim. You don't want to go the way of your father. And sadly, my sister's son drowned when he was 3.5, which was another real heart wrencher. So with that sort of lingering in the family, when I joined the Army, I decided that I wanted to become a triathlete and learn to swim. And long story made short, my first sergeant in our company found out I was a fitness guy and that I was super healthy because I kept winning all these military competitions for athletics. So he called me in one day and said, Chek, I want you to train all the fat guys, because he had the record for quite a number of years for the highest company average on the Army physical fitness test. So a company has 250 men roughly in it. And he had the highest score. 300 is the highest score. I think he had 240 was the highest average for an entire company. But he had just lost the competition and got knocked off. So when he heard about me, he calls me in very early in the morning and says, I would like you to take over training the fat guys. There was like 50 or 55 guys that were pretty much obese and out of shape. He said, I cannot lose this competition again. I just won't have it. And he was a badass soldier, this guy, ex-Vietnam warrior, all sorts of records and, medals and, the hardcore ass kicker dude. And I said, okay, I'll do it, but can I make a request? He said, sure. I said, I want to take swimming lessons because I want to do triathlon. So could I skip our regular PT, physical training, and go take swimming lessons at the pool? He said, absolutely. So I took over the fat guys. I conditioned them up. And then we set the all-time military record. Our company average went to 268, which had previously been unheard of. And so nice. I got to spend a year going to swimming lessons. And I remember the first time I swam a mile, it took me like 35 minutes.
It's not bad.
Yeah. Well, I got to the point, swimming's a skill that you really start to be an elite swimmer. When I was doing triathlons, I was usually coming out of the water in like 100th, 105th place. And I'd have to bike and run them down. I managed to finish in the top 10. Actually, I finished in the top 6 times. And but my swimming was always my weak spot. So I got to where I could swim a 25-minute mile. That was the best I could do in the years I was training triathlon, but it at least got me within striking distance. So one thing that keeps coming up with me, though, your wife, hats off to your wife, man.
Yeah, no shit.
Shit. I mean, my wife Penny supported me through everything, and I've got 2 wives, and Angie supports me beautifully. And I've met your wife; she's a beautiful, amazing woman. Isn't it just amazing the power of a committed, loving relationship, and how we ultimately can come to the realization we cannot make it through life without love?
Yeah, and interesting that you brought that up, because so I haven't told many people this story, but so a lot of people would say, damn, you were the healthiest person we know. How the hell did you get leukemia? Well, I mean, I've read stuff about father issues in leukemia. I've read stuff about head trauma and leukemia. Both of those things I've had, obviously. Yes. But I'll tell you where I think it starts, and I think you might agree with me. I think most stuff that is maybe inexplicable, maybe there's not a direct trauma, is caused by some type of emotional etiology. Let's put it that way. And there was a period in our life where my wife and I were contemplating having kids, and I didn't have a father figure really, so I was probably super scared about being a dad, and yet the woman that I loved, the woman I wanted to spend every second of my life with, really wanted to have kids, and yet I didn't feel like I could give that to her. And so I remember being at work and wanting to come home, and yet not wanting to be with my wife because I knew the subject matter was going to turn to having a kid, and I just wasn't ready, and it was scary, and I went through it was pulling me on both sides, and it just tore me apart. And then when we finally decided to pull the trigger, we were about to do it. That's when I got diagnosed. And I really think it was a lot of the physical stuff I've been through as a professional athlete, combined with the emotional turmoil that set the stage for the leukemia just to start. You know?
Yeah. Well, a dimension I'll add to that, all that you've just said is absolutely true in my experience, having worked with countless people that are, in dire straits of all types.
Yeah.
But one of the things that I've found in my studies, in depth psychology, in metaphysics, in various spiritual philosophies, be it Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, the variety of studies. A lot of these, religions, as you know, have factions that go against each other. Like there's 33,000 different branches of Christianity, all claiming to have the right interpretation of the Bible, etc. So the point I'm making is that this isn't a unified belief, but nothing is. But what I found through my own work and, doing my shamanic practices, soul recovery, astral travel, speaking with my guides, with my soul, and asking questions of my soul, which I have deep, deep trust in because it's done nothing but make my life better, is that typically the more advanced a soul is, the bigger the challenge they will take on in their life. And often more evolved souls will take on diseases. Sometimes children come in and take on diseases specifically to teach their family how to love and how to die. And I've met many people like yourself that are amazing people that even live healthy lives. And for example, when I was a kid, two of my mother's friends who were teachers at the Self-Realization Fellowship Temple that we went to were very healthy people. Both of them were school teachers. They were two of the most loving, amazing people I've ever met in my life. Well, the husband, Steve, got brain cancer and died very quickly. And a year later, his wife got brain cancer and died. And I remember being a teenager going, what? This doesn't make any sense. How in the world could this happen? Yeah. But when I talked to monks about these things and meditated on it and talked to my soul and, working with people that I've worked with that come to me with diseases and things, and I look at their history and I look at their life, all the paperwork and all the assessments we do as Chek professionals, and 2 and 2 just don't add up.
Yeah.
And so I've investigated and spoke to their own souls and found out on a number of occasions in my career that people actually choose to have a disease prior to coming in because it will bring them face to face with growth opportunities that they wouldn't have otherwise. So I think that's a real aspect that a lot of people don't look at because they're just not spiritually evolved enough or open enough to explore those concepts.
Yeah. Well, I think, not just for me, but for everybody, the challenges in our life are there to redirect us and or make us better. And you don't necessarily succeed every time, but it's an opportunity for growth for damn sure.
Well, as the old saying goes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, fuck, life kills you.
Yeah. Well, you start dying the day you're born. So,
yeah.
But as I tell people, don't get too trapped up in fear about death because life and death are just the names for two halves of a circle.
Yeah, I know. I agree. Something that I should tell you too, Paul, because I don't think you know this. My father-in-law went into the hospital, a little over a week ago, and was diagnosed with colon cancer, which is metastasized to his liver and all over his body. And we brought him home, I think this past Thursday to die. And we live next door to my in-laws. We bought a plot of land when I got back from Spain and Europe after professional cycling, and we built a house a little bit later. But so they're right next door, and he may die today. He may die in the next 24, 48 hours. But I do believe, he's just going, his energy goes on, and now the physical existence of who he was passes, but he continues. Let's put it that way.
Well, moment of silence of love and blessings for him on his journey.
Thank you, my friend. It's freaking hard, dude.
It is. I've been there, losing my dad, losing my brother, losing my grandparents, losing, my sister, losing her son. But, I know from all my experiences, and I think you probably know from your ayahuasca experiences and the things we've done together, that death isn't really death. It's birth into an experience of reconnection and reawakening to the truth of what life and love's really all about. And as hard as it is, if you just keep your mind there and try to reassure him that it'll all be okay, and just give him the space to know that Source is always with us, and that love is beyond body.
Well, I think the good part is that, obviously he's not conscious now. He's really close. Okay. And so he's not maybe able to understand exactly what he's going through. I don't know. In fact, he was even brain injured, as I may have said to you. He was in a coma for 11 days, 21 years ago. So we lost him 21 years ago, so that we got him for another 2 decades is a blessing. But I think, and I completely agree, having experienced what I've experienced, that like literally you're going on to become part of all, which is going to be freaking awesome. But it's what's hard for me right now, Paul, is I lost my dad in August, and then seeing what my wife is about to lose her dad, and how much I love her and what she's feeling. I think the mirror neurons in me experiences that deeply, and then also thinking about what she may be experiencing maybe any time now with the loss of her husband, meaning me, sometime in the future, because I mean we know how the story ends, as far as on this plane, and it sucks sometimes. It's beautiful, and yet it sucks, and yet I guess you have to have the suck to understand and appreciate the non-suck, right?
Yeah. Well, yin and yang need each other, but they forever create each other. And, if there was no death, there could be no life, without going into a long explanation of that. But if we just look around us, if you can imagine, as long as the world's been here, if nobody ever died, we would have destroyed the place, warred each other to death, run it all down, killed every animal, every insect, and it would be a living hell. So personally, I think death is a chance to make room for the other souls that need to come into the schoolyard and get the lessons they've come to learn.
Right.
But having had my own death experiences, I've been so deep on the medicines and actually wanted to die and practice letting go and actually ask my soul to stop my heart. And I had a profound experience of my heart stopping, and I was monitoring my pulse. And all of a sudden, I found myself in a completely other dimension, and it was mind-boggling. Paradoxically, very interestingly, I found myself standing on top of a mountain on a planet that looked very similar to Earth, but was in another dimension. And the first thing that hit me was, wow, I'm breathing. And the air is the freshest air I've ever breathed in my life. And I'm looking out and seeing the stars in the sky and the beauty. And then all of a sudden I realized I'm not in my body. I'm in my light body. I'm looking at myself and I can see inside myself like I'm looking into a galaxy. But my sense of being myself was completely intact. And then when I came back into my body, I have no idea how many seconds or minutes, because when you're deep in the medicines like that, time loses its shape and form.
Yeah.
But I asked Spirit to give me that experience, because I really needed to have some kind of an authentic experience of the death experience so that I could help others and answer some of my own questions. So I can only say for myself death doesn't scare me at all. I've practiced dying, and I look forward to the day I die. In fact, prior to Mana being born, the Earth plane had gotten a bit boring for me, and I just really was like, okay, Great Spirit, anytime you want to hit me with lightning and take me somewhere else, go ahead. But once Mana came along, I got so reinvigorated and my heart just blew wide open. And having Angie's love and Penny's love and, a number of factors, I just, it shifted me to now I'm happy to stay and do my work. And I've grown so much through my healing of that midlife crisis, just as you've grown so much through the healing of your leukemia and all the experiences you've lived through, that now I actually love every day. And now, I feel so grateful for everything I have in my life and the friends I have and great relationships, people like yourself that I can really be completely open and honest with about anything without it causing trouble. And I think that, without death, we wouldn't really have a sense of appreciation for life. We would take it, we wouldn't take it seriously. So for what it's worth, all I'm sharing is that it's a beautiful thing. Yogananda says death is like having 1,000 orgasms at once. And he shared that to let people know not to be afraid of death. And Yogananda was someone who could stop his heart at will. He could turn on the death experience just by consciously doing it. And so he was a very legitimate teacher. And my own experiences of working with people, I do a lot of work with people on the other side. So I've had many conversations with souls that have passed over. I can still connect to I talked to my grandmother. I've talked to Osho. I talked to Rumi. I talked to all sorts of people that have passed over. So through my own practices and experiences, I've come to realize death is by no means an end, but it is a real transition where we come face to face with the depth of our bonds with the souls that we share life with. And I think it's very important for us to go through the grieving process and use it to remind us of the beauty of that person and the love that we've shared with them and how they've touched our lives and made our lives more meaningful. And I think if more people could see death from a more positive perspective, and also to realize that a lot of people are in a lot of pain. My brother committed suicide because he was in so much pain he couldn't take life anymore. In fact, he left a suicide note, and it's etched into my mind. He said, "I'm leaving because no matter how hard I try, I cannot stop hurting the people I love the most. I love you. Goodbye." And so sometimes we have to acknowledge that death is a beautiful thing for people that have done their best in life but can't escape the jaws of pain and sadness and frustration. And so if we hold it as a celebration that each individual that dies gave God something unique that only they could give, then I think it's a little more easy to tolerate.
Without a doubt. I mean, I learned something every time I talk with you, Paul. And this interview was, supposed to be 2 or 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago. I can't remember. It got rescheduled, and I gotta think that there's a reason why it was rescheduled, because a week ago, relatively speaking, he was as healthy as a horse. So hearing this input from you is definitely synchronicity, if you will.
Well, that's how love works. So I give you my love and blessings. And if you need my help along the way for any reason, just text me and I'll make some space for you for sure. Andrew, you're a level 4 Chek practitioner. You've done what, HLC? Have you done HLC 3?
All of them. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Waiting for HLC 4 too, by the way.
Well, you're having it right now.
Yeah, I guess so.
I'm just curious, what has your Chek Institute education offered you, and what challenges have you been faced with being a Chek professional? because there's a lot of Czech professionals that have a really hard time. They go back to gyms where the management's telling them they got to sell all these junk vitamins and supplements or they'll lose their job, and people ridicule them for measuring people and doing what they call silly exercises with blood pressure cuffs and this kind of stuff. So how have you used your Czech education to help others, and what are the kinds of challenges you work with and get results with where other approaches have failed? I know that's a big question, but essentially, what has your Czech education offered you? What challenges have you faced being a Czech professional, and how have you used your education to help others?
Well, I mean, the reason I got into the whole Czech paradigm anyways is after a bike accident when I'd found triathlon, and like that was going to be my sport of choice and my athletic endeavor. The doctors told me I would never run again because my back was so jacked up. And it was through the Czech training and all the Czech tools that I'd learned that I was able to rehab myself. And then after doing that, you want to help others as well. So spinal pathology became a bit of a passion. And you look at the case as a whole. And I tell people all the time, you have a knee issue. It's not a knee issue. It's a body issue, right?
Yes.
It's not, unless you fell down and hit your knee, that knee is not the problem. It's coming from somewhere else. And that's also, unfortunately, the one of the challenges I face is because when somebody wants to work with me, in general, I'm going to give them a whole bunch of paperwork, and filling out that paperwork is quite intimidating to a lot of people because they just don't want to get real. And then they don't, maybe they might not understand how what they ate on Thursday is going to affect how they feel, on Saturday.
Yes.
But it's true. So I guess what I've gotten from the Czech Institute is the ability to look at the whole person and the whole picture and everything they're doing mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, and otherwise. And yet that's also been what's been the challenge, because some people are not ready for that. And the gym environment is definitely not ready for that. What I was doing before I went out on my own, I was doing an assessment in the spin room when spin classes weren't happening. So I would take a client in there and do some one-on-one work there, and nobody could really see what we were doing. And we get interrupted every now and again, but at least it wasn't in the middle of the leg press machine or something.
Yeah.
And then I started renting space from a massage therapist that was pretty much next door to the gym I was working in. And I realized I'm paying rent at the gym, rent at the massage therapist. That's a mortgage.
Yes.
So I could use that and just find my own place. And what really did it, I was out with Chris Munn and Janet Alexander taking a class that they taught about endurance training. And since I know endurance training, my wife will tell you that I was just going out there for a vacation. She may or may not be right. Either way, it was great because it was a turning point in my life in that I saw that all I needed was about 1,000. They're in the original Czech Institute, right?
Yeah. Well, yes. No, the original Czech Institute was on Pearl Street.
Okay.
In La Jolla. That's
gotcha.
the 609 South Vulcan is my second institute.
Okay. So, and I don't, more than I do how many square feet it was, but it was
1,000.
Yeah. So 1,000. Exactly. I'm like, if all I need is 1,000, I can find 1,000. I can afford 1,000, especially paying these two rents. And that's what I did. And I went out on my own, and it's a problem for a lot of people that you're doing stuff different, and no pain, no gain. They've got that mentality, but it also attracts a certain type of clientele that's ready for that, that's tired of the bullshit, kick your ass exercise, drain, don't train, take this particular supplement, that particular supplement, etc. And honestly, these days, just staying off your damn cell phone and paying attention to your clients probably going to, set you apart. So the education and the being able to look at the person and the whole person is what the Czech Institute gave me. And that's what took my business to the absolute next level. I mean, from making $17 an hour at the YMCA to what I'm charging now, which you helped me with. Even I think I told you about that. You helped me figure out what hourly rate I needed to be charging sooner or later, because through some business modeling, you and I did one-on-one.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're there. And how does it feel?
It feels great, man. I mean, so you're growing up, and you're thinking, I mean, even as a professional cyclist, I mean, the yearly income compared to the output, at least, is only at the very top are you making really good money. And I didn't think I'd love anything other than cycling until I found health. And being able to help people get healthy seems a lot less selfish than being a professional cyclist. It's also, I don't have to go, race my bike in the cold pouring down rain or whatever and risk, dying, screaming down a mountain at 70 miles an hour. But being able to help others and get paid to do that, and then the people that I'm attracting into my clientele, that the one thing that they have in common is they're all good people. They're old, they're young, they're athletes, they're non-athletes, male, female, gay, straight, black, white, doesn't matter. Good folks. So I basically get to spend my days hanging out with my friends, making them better, and growing myself, because it's a two-way street. They're helping me whether they realize it or not.
Absolutely. There's always, I tell people in my classes all the time, never misunderstand the fact that whenever you're working with a client, they're bringing gifts to you, and often as many or as big a gift as you're bringing to them. So always keep the flow of love open. Don't get caught in the fact that you're just their dictator because you happen to know a little bit more about this or that. And it's amazing I look around my office right here, and I'm surrounded by amazing gifts from clients that, have just expressed so much love and appreciation for my support, that every day I come to work and I get just the reminders of how powerful love is. And it has always made the pains and the challenges of my own journey much more palatable. If I didn't have that love in the relationships with the people that I've supported and their support of me, then I really wouldn't probably be any different than a mechanic or somebody that fixes other things, or, a psychologist just doing the same shit over and over again. But it is, the caregiver archetype is a real tough archetype, because it's so easy to lose yourself because you identify yourself by what you can do for others.
Yeah.
So
for sure.
When you realize that if you open yourself to the relationship and that there's a reciprocity, then it's not just doing for others, it's receiving from others. And I think for a lot of healthcare professionals, if they just shifted their mind from it's my job to fix and direct to it's my job to have a relationship and share with those people what I know to be true from my own life experience, which for most healthcare professionals, they can't do because they're just as sick as their clients. But Chek professionals are quite healthy people. Oh, by the way, a bobcat's here. Hallelujah. Special day, buddy.
That's cool.
You have a bobcat visitor. So you need to look up the symbolism of the bobcat.
Will do.
I've only seen 3 of them in the last year or so, and they have all shown up when I was doing podcasts. She was right on the right where the water charger is. See her? It's a female. That's amazing, Andrew. And after we just got done talking about your stepfather passing away too, bobcats really are masters of hiding and disguise. So if you see one right out in the open like that, it's special. And from me as a medicine man, spirit guide, it's a spiritual message. And they're masters of dealing with challenges, by the way.
Okay.
But very, very special moment right here. Thank you for sharing this with me, buddy.
Without a doubt, no doubt.
Yeah, I'd love it if you can give us an overview of what you offer in each of your books. And we touched a bit on your DVD, but, I got to review those books. They're beautifully written. They're very sound in their material and great resources for people. So can you give us a little encapsulation of each of the books?
Yeah, so the first one was Holistic Strength Training for Triathlon, and don't let the title fool you. It's really a primer on how to lift, and how to lift in respect to the Chek paradigm, which is, the flexibility and stability before strength, before power. And then it has a whole section at the end talking about proper nutrition and lifestyle, which is really the foundation on which flexibility, stability, strength, and power is built, right?
Yes.
And so it's without a doubt, it was not possible without the Chek training, the Chek education, the Chek background. And in fact, I think you wrote the blurb on the back of that particular book.
Oh, good.
And yeah. And then, and by the way, I started writing that when I was first diagnosed. I was tied to an IV pole, and I was like, well, I can't do anything physical, so I'm gonna start doing some stuff academically. And it's anytime you've got one challenge, one door closes, that another door opens. That's cheesy, but it's true. And so that's when I started writing that book.
That's amazing.
And then the nutrition book and you wrote the foreword for that one. And I will tell you, everybody who's listening right now, the foreword is better than the book. Read the foreword. You could stop at the foreword, but the foreword's freaking amazing. When you showed me that before we went to publish it, I was blown away, Paul, and I was so psyched. But it's what I've learned at the Chek Institute, and then just kind of taken to a deeper level with some of my studies under other mentors. I mean, you told me that you went and you studied with the best of the best, and that's how you've developed your philosophies, etc. And so I just started trying to do the same and exploring the other amazing minds out there, of which, not many compared to you, but there are some that are out there, if you look for them, if you know where to look. And I think I did a good job with the nutrition book, and I'm proud of both of them. And I think they're worthy sources, especially for anybody who's listening to this podcast right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're beautiful books. And I was very impressed when I reviewed them. And I thought, wow, I couldn't have wrote a better book than either of these myself. It was almost like you had jumped inside me and said, let me see if I can follow the line of, giving something to the world that's meaningful and not full of silliness. And I was just deeply grateful and proud of you, man.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think I say somewhere, if not in the first acknowledgement of the book, the second one, that you've been my co-author for both of these. And that's just the truth, because you were there every step of the way. And just so you know, I mean, the reason I started writing the second book and I got so deep into nutrition is because at the age of 40, after 4 years of a layoff from any kind of competitive sports whatsoever, I was like, I'm going to come back to triathlon. I started my business. I started raising a son. Everything was back to where I thought I could give some time to athletic endeavors again, be selfish enough to start doing that. And I said, okay, well, if you're 40 years old and you haven't competed in 4 years and you still have leukemia, you better be spot on with your nutrition. And so that is literally what allowed me to race and compete at that level and then win the Ironman in 2012, was because of my nutritional protocol, which was pretty much perfect. I didn't follow the 80-20 rule then, Paul. I followed 100% zero at that point.
Yeah. Well, when I read your book on nutrition, I'm like, wow, I'm picking up all sorts of stuff out of this book I didn't even know. I was like really impressed. And, it was obvious that you'd worked with other mentors and found other resources that I hadn't come across, because I thought the information in there was, even for me, it was excellent reading, very, very good book.
Well, I appreciate that, Paul. Coming from you, that means everything, dude.
Well, I tell it, as my father says, I calls them as I sees them.
Yeah.
In your work with clients, what have you found to be the most common limiting beliefs and challenges you have to help people transform into new dream affirmative beliefs and behaviors?
Well, everybody wants a quick fix, Paul, but it's not nutrition, and day style, it's nutrition and lifestyle. So it's going to take a while. And, also everybody's looking for what to take. What's the next supplement I need to take? And I think you might've taught me this. Like, somebody comes to me, I usually take them off all supplements.
Yeah, I tell them, don't ask your doctor what you should take. Ask your doctor what you should take away.
Exactly, take away. And I do that all the time. And I think those are the concepts that are hard for people to accept until they finally try it. And then when they try it, they're sold.
Yes.
So,
the world of supplementation and standard medical approaches, as well as diets of all kinds seems to be quite a trap for a lot of people. What have you observed in regard to, you kind of hit on that, but I'm curious, what is your philosophy personally, your living philosophy with regard to using supplementations or implementing things like biohacking and other modern approaches? And how do you incorporate a sort of a second question is, how do you incorporate a multidisciplinary approach? Because, I'll give you an example. Like, I'm not a supplement monger, Yeah, I take an organic whole food multivitamin for men 55 plus. I might take some chlorophyll or, the stuff I use Wade Lightheart's enzymes. And for those of you listening, if you haven't listened to my podcast with Wade Lightheart, it's awesome. A lot of great information in there. So I use enzymes. I use a few just kind of natural support stuff, but not crazy stuff. But an example is, I used to have this spot that developed on the left side of my nose, which I knew was from vaporizing tobacco and herbs because, I use a volcano and it has a bag on it, and the oils basically turn the bag like a dark brown, and if you open the bag, it's coated with oil, and it's exactly the color my spot was. And so what I would do is I would cut the vaporizing way back or sometimes nothing, and then I would increase my saunas to a good 2 saunas a day, and I could watch it disappearing. So I thought, okay, I'm okay. It's not cancer or anything like that. It's just my detox pathways can't keep up. And at periods in my life where I was under just so much work stress and trying to manage so much and so much engagements, travel, people, I found that the vaporizing the herbs helped me sort of have a sense of joy at work where I didn't feel like I was under so much pressure. I could take a little break and go look out the window and hope to see a bobcat or a coyote or a deer and have a bag and just, so for me, once I knew that it wasn't cancer or anything, I said, okay, I just got to cut it back. But Angie, being a nutritionist, said to me, you might need glutathione because it's the most powerful antioxidant there is, and it could really help your detoxification. And so within 2 weeks of taking glutathione, I literally every day watched that spot disappearing from about the size of a dime to nothing. Wow. And I noticed that I had a lot more, a lot less sense of being kind of backed up. If you vaporize very much and you don't use regular saunas, you get this sort of sense that you're backed up inside. So point being is, I've learned in many, many of my own experiences that there is a time and a place for various supplementation. There is a time and a place for medical drugs and pretty much everything. And even though I'm kind of like not into the biohacking thing, I think for a lot of people that just have no willingness to connect to their body, at least it's a door open. So what's your sort of living philosophy in these regards?
It goes back to the basics, that's where I want people to start. It's everything I learned at the Chek Institute about thinking, breathing, drinking, eating, movement, and sleep. Get those, and 9 times out of 10, you're good. Okay. And then there's times, like you said, with the spot that you need a little something extra. That's when we start to explore the use of supplements and other methodologies to help heal the body, etc. But also, we're dynamic organisms. So something that was working for us or something that we needed last year, we don't need this year. Something that we need right now, we won't need in a week. Who knows? But and you teach this in a lot of your programs about listening to your body and let it be the guide. It's just most of us aren't doing that. And I also think, unfortunately, a lot of us, I won't say most of us, but a lot of us aren't healthy enough to trust what we're getting and receiving from our body in terms of signals of how to change.
Yes, indeed. That's a real
I think
issue.
The healthier you are, the more you can trust, those signals that your body's giving you. But otherwise, sometimes you got to take it with a grain of salt.
Yeah. And, I don't know if you've listened to my 2 podcasts I did for our Reimagine event for the Black Friday sale, but I go through in part 1, the structure stages of consciousness and what part of our bodies each level of consciousness is related to and the functions in our bodies. And in part 2, I give a whole comprehensive menu of things you can do to better access archaic consciousness, to better access magic, to better access mythical, to effectively use the mental and to become an integral human being. Right. So, for the listeners, you might find that, but you might, if you haven't listened to that, find it interesting as well, Andrew.
Okay, will do. Check that out.
What are the biggest challenges you feel humanity faces today, and what suggestions would you offer the general public as to how to contribute to healing, integration, and wholeness so that the children of the world have a better chance of living without unnecessary pain or confusion?
That's huge, that question, and I think we've touched on it a little bit. I think it's, we got a lack of connection, with everything from our food to religion to politics to ourselves even. Nobody's connecting, and we're so polarized one way or the other. And when that happens, if you're at one pole or the other, you're going to freeze your ass off because the truth is not there to warm you. Let's put it that way. So
that's true.
It's true. And thing is, like, all this is a medication of sort, like the diets, the religions, the relationships, they're medicines of some sort. But again, like we've touched upon, these medicines can be used or abused. And I think if we could understand and realize what we've talked about at the very beginning of this podcast, with the connections that you realize are true via the help of plant medicines, but ultimately you really don't need that. The truth is truth. And sooner or later, I guess it's like, was it Confucius that said the only thing that can, or soon be set free? What is it? Something like the sun, the moon, and the truth, or something like that. You know this better than I do, Paul.
I don't remember that particular one.
Some quote like that. But anyways, I think we need to connect more on every level, and that could start with, you sit down to dinner tonight after listening to this podcast, and you connect with your food, and you sit there and you think about how that food has come to your table, and maybe put a blessing upon it about the sacrifice that's been made to bring that food to your table. And then now you're going to accept it into your body, and you're going to do something and make something of the sacrifice, and let that food become part of you, so that you can then go ahead and do the work of the universe, and making it a better place, which is always trying to move towards perfection. We just keep freaking tripping it up and holding it back.
Yeah. I think it's really a matter of worship, and I start my day every day with giving thanks to the north, the south, the east, the west, the above, the below, which is a Native American practice. I give thanks to all the spirit guides and the beings of other dimensions that inform me and support me in supporting others. I give thanks to all the living beings of the earth that support us. I give thanks to all the people that love and support me, and to my plants and my trees, and give thanks for the beautiful family I have, and for the heaven house and the property I get to enjoy every day, and my home in Vista. I give thanks to all the instructors, staff, students, and podcast followers, and ask them to all join me in body, mind, and spirit in helping make the world a better place for all living beings each day. I spend about 45 minutes every morning just saying thank you and giving gratitude, and realizing that my life would have no meaning without everybody else in it, and that it's the beings of nature that have sacrificed so much for us and taken so much abuse so we could have more video games and shopping malls where we sell a lot of garbage that we don't need. In other words, Mother Nature, she really bends backwards over for us, but it's time where we have to wake up together and realize that our childish ways can't go on much longer. We're crippling Mother Nature, and it's going to come at great cost to us if we don't wake up together. And so I agree with you. I think really it's a lot of it is just celebrating what you have. And when you fill yourself with gratitude, you don't have to keep buying stuff to make yourself happy. You don't have to take drugs to make yourself happy. You find joy in relationship. You find joy in the meals you eat, the water you drink, the friends that you have. You can even grow to the point where you can have healthy adversity in your life and conflict, and realize that if you can stay connected at the heart, then you can really learn from other people's opinions instead of just flat out denying them or rejecting them, but being brave enough to view the world through their eyes so you can understand what it looks like to be inside of that perspective. And sometimes I've found, Penny can tell you, and so can Angie, I study a lot of irritating stuff like fundamental religious ideologies and courses that are designed for Christians and Muslims and, people that are really trapped in belief systems. And Penny's often says, why do you keep listening or watching that stuff? And I'm like, I have to study what ails people so I really can learn to understand them and help them. And I think if we all just celebrate the magic and the mystery, that we've gotten so busy trying to make money and buy shit that we overlook every day. It's like, how many people get to see a bobcat right out their window?
Yeah.
Or even know what a bobcat is, or how magical of an experience that is, but also realizing that there's almost no place for them to live anymore, So just to,
right.
I think if we realized how many animals and species and insects we were killing just so we could buy more shit, we might turn our churches into meeting places to share love and our own spiritual experiences and our own challenges, instead of having books read to us about what God expects of us and how we're going to burn in hell if we don't behave in a certain way and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I just wanted to, touch base with you on that. My final questions, second to final question is, if you knew you were going to leave tomorrow, like your stepfather might be leaving, what would you like to say to everyone as an inspirational message?
I mean, it's probably my tagline, Paul, which is the only limitations we have are the ones we set for ourselves. I know for a fact that there's no such thing as a self-made man. I mean, I've had plenty of help along the way. I've had my wife, without a doubt, family, friends, but there are plenty of self-defeated men and women,
Yes. It's sad.
Yeah. But and I tell my clients all the time, especially at first, when they're first starting to work with me, I believe in them a lot more than they believe in themselves. And you're just saying that. So I'm not just saying that. I've experienced it. I know exactly what it's like. Watch what's going to happen when you finally start believing in yourself as much as I start believing in you.
Exactly. You remember who J.P. Sears is, right?
Oh, hell yeah. Yeah.
Well, one of the things that J.P. Sears often credits me for is being one of the first teacher he ever had that believed in him. And he often tells, and he shared with me in a podcast I did with him when I was in Austin, Texas last, that my believing in him inspired him to grow into his potential. And, when you really realize what God is, then you can believe in the entirety of creation. You can believe that the problems are there to inspire creativity, not giving up. And oftentimes our self-defeat is because we're too insecure to reach out for the help of wise people that have already solved those kinds of challenges. Or, someone who's dying of leukemia could get a hold of a guy like you and get enough inspiration to really potentially completely heal, simply because they now know it's possible. I mean, remember when Jim Fixx, I think it was, broke the 4-minute mile. Scientists had said over and over again it was impossible for a human being to run a 4-minute pass faster than a 4-minute mile. But within 1 year of him doing it, I think 13 other men did it. And by the second year, 57 people had broken the 4-minute mile. Why? Because they were inspired by one human being to know it was possible.
Right.
Well, it's been a absolutely lovely conversation. It's, selfishly, I got to hang out with my buddy for a couple of hours and just share some love. So I have my selfish interests in the podcast, but also I just wanted to share you with as many people as I could, because you've certainly been a hell of an inspiration to me, man. I remember when you were going through your challenge with leukemia, I was like sending you love every day, because I'm like, wow, this guy is facing a hell of a dragon with teeth, and he needs the love, all the love he can get. And he may not know I'm sending it to him, but my love and all of our love has wings that fly faster than the speed of light. So to close out, where can people find out more about you, your coaching service? Because you coach people all over the world, don't you, through Skype or FaceTime?
Yeah, I do a lot of nutrition and lifestyle coaching as far as that's concerned. And also some coaching as far as cycling and triathlons concerned as well. But my passion is just in health, not so much in sport. And we can do both depending on what a goal is. But my website's triumphtraining.com. And, I'm not very, as you well know, as Penny will tell you as well, I'm not very technologically inclined. I just started texting like last year.
Good.
Yeah. But I am on Facebook, and I'll do usually once a day kind of post about health of something that I think is interesting and will help people out there. But if people are ever in the Atlanta area and can actually come to my studio, I'd love to share it with them. It's 3,000 square feet of just absolute beauty. It's inspired by what I found and learned at the Chek Institute. So I think if they're looking for something that's not San Diego but pretty close second, it's not a bad place to go.
Not bad at all. And your books and your DVD are on Amazon. Let's have you just share the names of the books and the DVD one more time.
Yeah, the books are Spot on Nutrition and Holistic Strength Training for Triathlon. And the DVD is called Living is Winning. I don't even know if it's actually still out there for sale or whatever. I had nothing to do with it other than I was let them film me for 2 years or 3 years or whatever it was. But if you want to see what bad hairstyle looked like in the early 90s, you can get a kick out of that.
No, it's there. I researched it this morning. It's still available on Amazon. It's got 5 stars too.
Sweet. Yeah, I mean, it won Atlanta Best Film Festival in Atlanta and a few other film festivals, I guess.
Yeah, no, I found it a powerful, moving documentary. So highly recommend it, especially if you have a family member or you yourself are suffering from what could be seemingly terminal disease. I'm sure Andrew will breathe some spirit right into you, right through your television screen. Andrew, I love you, buddy. I'm proud of you, man. If you were the only friend I'd accumulated in my lifetime, I'd be quite gratified. So keep doing what you're doing and sharing your love and helping me grow just by being you.
Well, I appreciate that, Paul. You mean more to me and a whole bunch of other folks than you realize. And we're glad to have you in this world, man. It wouldn't be the same without you.
A whole great spirit. If you loved our podcast today, share it with all your friends and let's spread the love and make the world a little better place every day so that the children have a better chance of really enjoying the playground and not having to have unnecessary pain. And let's make some room for some real food and some real farming and clean the water up and do our part to only put money into the corporations that are living and practicing sustainable practices. And I think we got a chance at turning things around and getting the Garden of Eden back in shape again. So a whole great spirit. Andrew, I look forward to our next opportunity to share some love. So thanks for being with me today, bud.
Me too, brother. Talk soon.
Thank you for listening to Living 4D with Paul Chek and today's guest, Andrew Johnston. You can visit Andrew's website at triumphtraining.com or follow him on Facebook at andrew.johnston.754. If you are interested in working with Andrew, you can email him directly, andrew@triumphtraining.com. Follow Paul on Instagram and Twitter at Living4D Podcast or on his YouTube podcast channel, youtube.com/Living4D with Paul Chek. You can watch more on Paul's blog at paulcheksblog.com and the Chek Institute's new website at chekiva.com.